Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Friday Clown-versation. I'm your host, Barnaby King from Clown Spirit, where we use the power of clowning to bring lightness, connection, and joy to your life and the lives of everybody around you. Today, I'm talking to the amazing healthcare and hospital clown, Caroline Simmonds. So don't go anywhere. Stick around.
It's just a conversation with a fellow clown. It's not very serious, we're clowning around. It's really just a clown-versation.
Yay! Welcome, everybody. So wonderful to have you here for another Clown-versation. Today I'm talking to Caroline Simmonds, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. But if you're joining right now, if you're new to the Clown Spirit family, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you here today. And please hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel and get access to lots of other cool clown videos. And come and hang out and just watch the Clown-versations every week. Check out my website, which is clown-spirit.com. Also, there is an amazing event happening tomorrow that I wanted to tell you about in our Clown Spirit world. The incredible clown teacher and performer Shannon Calcutt will be teaching a Clown X, which is a kind of masterclass, and they happen every single month. It's amazing expertise from the world's best teachers coming to you every single month. And tomorrow's is with Shannon Calcutt. It's called Permission to Shine. And she is an absolute master at getting people to play in a safe space online. During the whole lockdown, she developed these amazing tools and techniques for helping people to release and play and just embrace their flaws and all of that wonderful clown stuff online. She is masterful at it. So if you're not doing anything else tomorrow, Saturday, December 3rd, at 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, which translates as 6 p.m. in the UK, 7 o'clock in the evening if you're elsewhere in Western Europe, come along. I will put the link to sign up at the bottom of this video later so that you can easily sign up. There are spaces still available. If you're tuning in right now, say hi in the comments. It'd be wonderful to hear from you. Who's here today? Say hello. Chime in into the comments. Tell us where you are, what you're doing today, what's happening in your amazing clown life. And also, if you have any questions or things you'd like to say, join in with the conversation while I'm talking with Caroline. I'll feed those comments and questions right into the conversation. So, without any further ado, I want to welcome my amazing guest. This is it's really a pleasure to talk to Caroline today. She is one of the world's leading professional clown doctors. In 1991, she founded Rire Medecin, the first clown doctor company in Europe, which now employs an amazing 132 clown doctors. I mean, this is according to the website. I suspect it's even gone up by now. In 63 hospitals, seeing over 90,000 hospitalized children each year. She was born actually in Washington, D.C. in the US. She actually studied medicine for a while, then switched to theater and music. She moved to Paris, studied with Decroux in Paris, and music with Betsy Jolas. She was co-founder of the Palace of Marvels, a street theater company that toured Europe for 10 years. She worked for 4 years with Big Apple Circus Clown Care Unit in New York City, one of the first professional clown doctor companies in the world. And then she moved to Paris, back to France, and she founded Rire Medecin, which, as I said, has just grown from strength to strength. She is an inspiration to all of us, and I'm very excited to talk to her today. So welcome onto this Clown-versation stage, please, Caroline Simmonds. Oh, we have a curtain. Oh, she's there.
Oh, who's there? Hello.
Hi.
I was getting bored back there.
Don't be afraid. It's okay.
I'm not afraid.
We're very kind. We're very gentle here in the Clown-versations world.
We'll have a cookie. Take a bite. Everybody gets a cookie.
Everybody have a bite of this wonderful cookie.
Mm.
Is that a local Christmas seasonal delicacy kind of
Yes,
thing?
I bought it in Switzerland a week ago when I was seeing my daughter in Lausanne. It's a Swiss cookie. It's kind of spicy. But goes well with the tea, oolong.
Oh, what a beautiful mug as well. Look at that. And can you just share?
Mug? You mean my face or the teacup?
Yes. Is that a, what is that? What is
That's a teacup. That's a teacup that was designed by Chris Guston, a friend of my husband. My husband is a potter, ceramist. So I have a gazillion teacups here.
Very, very cool. And could you share with everyone your beautiful teapot that you showed me earlier? Because I just love that teapot. It's so cool. Such a beautiful thing. We're just suckers for beautiful objects, aren't we? We just love beautiful objects.
Yeah, can't resist.
Yeah. Well, Caroline, it's such a delight to meet you and have you on the show. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. It's kind of surreal. I'm imagining, gazillion people behind their screens, or else I'm imagining my friend Becky all alone in South Carolina. God knows.
Becky, are you here? Are you hearing us? Chat right into the chat.
Who knows?
Avner's on. Avner Eisenberg says hello.
Avner, hi.
Yeah. Hi, Avner.
We started together in 1971 in Paris when he was at Lecoq, and he would carry my suitcases for me. And my ex, Jules, taught him to walk the rope, and he taught us to juggle. This is way back when we were, hardly had whiskers.
Wow. Now you have so many.
Well,
and Avner has one or two more. So that's a really wonderful story. I'm imagining you guys, as these kooky, eccentric, sort of intense students together.
I wasn't at Lecoq. I had quit everything. I had finished college at Bennington College, and I just sort of sold everything, took a flute, a pair of jeans, and a T-shirt, and $200 from some anonymous lover, and went to Paris, and met an amazing man, Jules Cordière, and he had created something called the Palace of Wonders, Le Palais des Merveilles, and I auditioned in a cafe. I did a few walkovers, played some Bach on my flute, and slammed the door. And he followed me, and I stayed with him for 10 years. And this was sort of the base of my performing work, was being in the streets, passing the hat for really 10 years in Europe, traveling all over the place, eating potatoes, living in a truck. And Avner was part of that adventure right in the beginning in 71, when I had first gotten to Paris. And I had been a student with Decroux in 69, 70. But I only lasted 3 months at Lecoq. I cried too much behind the masque neutre.
It was why was that? What was going on? What did you?
Well, I think to do Lecoq, you have to be pretty mature and pretty accomplished. And I was just a long piece of spaghetti at that time. I was really young. I was only 19. And I had started doing studies in medicine. And, I was really good at math. And then I worked in a hospital, and I took care of children who had been burnt with napalm in a burn ward for 3 months. And that certainly convinced me that I was good at making faces, but I was not cut out to make decisions on people's lives and stir chemicals and be a doctor. There was a sense of wanting to repair the world, that's for sure, and save tortured souls. That was always there, from childhood. But so the challenge was to do theater, and I knew I would be horrible, just terrible, a failure. I knew it, and it was I was sure I would be horrible. I was going right into the wall at full speed, and my parents were devastated. But I needed a 300% challenge in my life after having wanted to be a doctor from age 4 to 18 and a half. And I was terrible, and everyone laughed. I was so bad they laughed, and I had no idea why they laughed. I guess we figured that out when we're about 70, right, Avner? Um, it takes a while to understand why people laugh and then why they laugh again. So yeah, my professor, my drama professor at Bennington said, "Oh, you should probably be a clown." I was so insulted. It was the beginning of the Barnum School in Florida. I was so insulted. I said, "No, I want to be an actress," but I couldn't memorize. I was so dyslexic in a way. I couldn't memorize anything, so I would make up the words, and that would make them laugh even more, which was devastating. So I just stopped talking, basically. I went to France. I was a musician, though. I have been a musician since I was 8, and played the flute, bassoon, sax. All the musical comedies. I was very comfortable being in the wings in the dark. And when I went to college, and started theater. I was very comfortable becoming a composer, and writing for the theater, writing for film. And when I sort of finished Bennington, 1971, with an enormous production called Circus after having spent a year in Paris studying with this amazing composer, Betsy Jolas, with an amazing flautist, Michel Debost. And I went from Lecoq and my tears to Etienne Decroux, and it spoke to me because it was about scales. It was about going up, a scale, the way music is, because there was the head, and then it's so weird looking in this camera because it's the opposite of what I thought it is. I'm doing an Anlay.
I know.
What that is.
Yes.
But there's scales for the body, and it spoke to me profoundly. And Decroux said, "You must spend 10 years not speaking, and because you've just spent 20 years talking too much, and you're not talking with your bodies." So I actually did that. I did not speak for the next 10 years in performance. And when I met Jules for the Palais des Merveilles, I was a bit of his muse, and we created a character, Ratapus, which literally means rat flea, charming. And I spoke with my body. I spoke with my hands. I spoke in space. I learned to move in space and really to relate to people, one-on-one, one with the crowd, no fourth wall. Am I getting through?
Yes, totally. So with the Palais des Merveilles, you were, was it a street show essentially, or was it actually a show? Was it more like a company or a group that went around doing different?
It was a group of ragtag performers, but we had a guy named Johnny Coco. He was a midget, and we would paint him green. And we had an acrobatic number. We were only in the streets. On public squares. We had a rather heavy young woman who had done ballet, so nobody wanted her but us. And she was absolutely brilliant, and I would play Swan Lake on the flute, and she would dance. It was absolutely magnificent. And we had a tendency also to discover people in cafes who had strong characters, and we would turn them into angels, or we would turn them into green people or blue people. And this was in the very early 70s. We had a ex-con who was the bearded lady, and he would do a belly dance at some point. But we had a canevas, like in Comédie de l'Arte, so that nothing was really scripted except the events. And there were acrobatics. We had Jules was a trapezist. He'd also had a PhD in art, but double trouble, and very good looking, and tattoos, everything we love once in our lives. And he was brilliant, and we were all acrobats. We all worked out. We used to work out in our jeans in public squares, and on the weekends we would pass the hat. Sometimes there were just me and Jules, and sometimes there were 10 of us, and sometimes there were 12 of us. And if we got a contract in Belgium, we would go up to Belgium and play on the Grand Place and earn a little bit of money. They were years.
Just enough to keep going, just enough to survive, right?
Yeah, one thing to the next. I mean, I really learned how to cook with potatoes and rice and pasta. I
Love
know.
this. I just love this story and this feeling that I get, because I've talked to a couple of other people who I think like Avner and Nola Ray, and people who were sort of in that 70s sort of movement of, and it feels like that isn't happening anymore somehow. That there aren't these kind of ragtag groups of performers who just kind of survive off potatoes and just kind of cut their teeth, traveling for 10 years around Europe, performing everywhere. It's a romantic. I have a romantic image of it. And
well, it's not that romantic, because there were days where we had a hard time eating in the winter. I mean, it was difficult, but it was about passion. It was about the love of the street and the love of urban architecture, and the love of the way a flute sounded between two buildings, the love of just meeting someone you'd never meet before, a fishmonger, and trading a song for a bag of shrimp. And there's nothing like it. But I don't think it's possible anymore, because I don't know. I grew up I was born in 1949, post-war. In a funny way, everything was possible. Even though my parents, I think, would have preferred me to be a doctor. And they were absolutely devastated when I passed the hat for all these years. They just, nobody understood it. But I was.
And yet this was like the fundamental basis of who you are now. So it's super important, right?
Totally. Because it's about generosity, theatrical perfection in a funny way. I mean, we wanted our shows to be gorgeous. You say ragtag because we were poor, but we were gorgeous. I mean, I had makeup that took me 2.5 hours. That was, sort of very, very almost between Katakali and, rain. I don't know, very hippie rainbow. But I had no eyebrows, and I would put each color on very, very carefully. And it took 2.5 hours, and Jules took at least 3 hours for his makeup. He was a painter, actually. So it came out of this very high level painterly vision of different characters. I was what they call a pitre. I don't know what we call that in English. It was the naive clown. He was definitely my white clown, very fierce and ridiculous and gorgeous, with I had a very glittery suit, and I had big wings. I had these dragonfly wings, and they would hook me up sometimes to cables, and I would fly between buildings and steal hats. But it is the base of what's in the hospital now, because first of all, I learned to fundraise by passing the hat, and that might sound
of course, that never occurred to me. Of course.
It's occurred to me, because I have absolutely no problem with asking someone for €1 or 100,000 euros. It's all the same to me. When you've passed the hat that intensely, with so much love for the people who give you 1 franc or €1, and I love that. I love the exchange with people when I was in my 20s and early 30s. So it is the fundraising part, but that it's also going into a place where there is no culture, or very little culture, into a hospital where children and their parents are they're very emotional. It's very emotional. The streets in the 70s was very emotional, because it was after May 68. We got arrested all the time in the early 70s. We got
really
hauled off to the in a paddy wagon once a month. But that was the game, and we got kidnapped by the police once, because they wanted a Christmas show. We didn't even know it. We were passing the hat in front of the La Coupole, in Montparnasse, and suddenly the cops come, and they shove Jules and myself. We're just the two of us. It was Christmas Eve, I'm Jewish, so who cares? They shoved us into the paddy wagon, and we're going, oh shit, it's like Christmas Eve. I didn't really care, Hanukkah was past, and they opened the door to the police station, and everyone cheered, and we went, "We've got our performers! was, yes, do a show for us. I mean, the police. So
only in France could that happen.
Only in France. And and we performed and we ate with them and we drank with them and they drove us home at 5 in the morning, and the concierge was
Wow.
peeking out of her window, and she saw these two
What's
ragtags
going on here?
getting out of the
Yeah.
the paddy wagon, and and basically almost kissing on both cheeks all the policemen. It was something. Even Fellini couldn't invent that one.
These are gorgeous, gorgeous stories, Caroline. I'm just loving this so much. Avner says, I grew my makeup even then. I grew my makeup? Okay. I played the bearded lady. Ah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, when Peluche wasn't there, he played the bearded
Madame Rose. I was like, grew my makeup? What? Oh, okay. The belly dancer was Paluche, who would often disappear and be found in a bar on the way to the pitch.
That's right. Yeah,
I think we need to get you guys together on one of these conversations so you can reminisce. Karen Gersh says, so great to see your shining face and hear these stories I don't know. You're amazing.
You know all my stories, Karen. You know all my stories.
Well, there are more. There are more to be discovered, Caroline. There's always more. Come on, more.
Well, I'll tell one funny story. Was just the cops were chasing us one day. We were in front of Notre Dame, but across the street on Quai Montebello, and a whole police boat started coming towards us. And then there was a whole car of CRS. CRS are like the meanest ones in the whole world. And we had this buggy that actually Avner will remember. The buggy had a big bass drum on it, and we would push the buggy, and we pushed it up this hill, the Rue Saint-Jacques, and the police were behind us, and there were about 10 of us, and we were kind of walking really fast and forceful as if we were going someplace. We had no idea where we were going. Suddenly a door opens, and it was the École Sourds-Muets. In other words, it was a school for non-hearing children, and it was Saturday, so it was children who lived in this school. And we saw all these kids. We had no idea where we were. They're going, and the director opened the door for us, and we were there until we put the children to bed. We created a show. We spit fire. We did acrobatics. We somehow managed to talk to them. He's my lover. We sleep together. We were able to speak to them. And it was just a beautiful encounter. I mean, just unbelievable. Hours and hours with these children that went from 4 years old up to 17, and they're directed. And we ate with them, and then we went on our merry way, and did one last show.
Sorry to interrupt, Caroline. I'm just really, as you speak, I'm just seeing how this was all laying the foundations for what you do now.
Totally.
That the essence of what you do now is there. It's evolving in those times.
Well, it's about the encounter for me, and there's the encounter like this, there's the encounter like that, and when you're in a hospital, you have to do this, whether it's a newborn or a teenager who hates you, or a mother who's grieving, or even a child who's afraid of you. But you have to learn to really be spot on the encounter, and then you can do a crescendo into laughter. But if you have an intention to make someone laugh, it'll fail for sure.
So how do you you were a performer for many years, and then at some point you became
a performer. I worked
absolutely
a few nights ago.
Yeah, in fact, I think I shared that on Facebook, that lovely picture of you warming up with your ukulele in the maternity ward. And so at some point though, you shifted gears. It seems like from being just a performer into being more of an organizer and a teacher, and eventually into what you're doing now. So can you tell us something about that transformation?
Well, I was always an organizer, to tell you the truth. I mean, I had no choice. I mean, here's a funny anecdote. When I went to elementary school, I lived in Silver Spring, Maryland, and down the street from me was Frank Rich, who was one of the biggest, became one of the biggest theater critics in New York City afterwards. And Frank and I would have these little sort of happenings when we were in like 4th grade, and people would come and I would marry my sister to, Alfie or something. So I had a sense of organization, although I wasn't a very show-offy kind of kid. I was actually shy, but I was always very comfortable in the wings and preparing things and making things. And when I lived with Jules, he was just brilliant, and I felt very much in service to organizing things for him, also performing. But I painted his dragon tail, and I would call the performers, and some performers you had to call them a day ahead of time so they would be on time the next day. I just learned lots of strategy and techniques of running a company, and then I did this for 10 years. Dragon tails and tours, and inventory. We went to Tunisia. We had to do an inventory. I mean, I learned all these little things by myself, but I also learned them when I was in college at Bennington. Actually, my freshman year, we did a poetry class, and the teacher said, "Well, what are your goals?" And we said, "Well, we want to do a medieval festival." Okay, fine. Let's do a retro planning. In other words, we're in September. What do you need to do in November to be ready? What do you need to do in October to be ready? So I learned these things at Bennington College, believe it or not, and how to plan a performance, and also be creative and to write it as well, to be autonomous. So I learned a lot of that in college. I mean, just from my childhood as well, and being a bossy kind of older sister, helping my mother run a household. My mother got a PhD when I was growing up, and it took her 10 years. So I had an enormous amount of responsibility. I cooked for my entire family from age 12 to 17, almost every night. I mean, there's just a lot of little skills that part of life. So when I was in New York City in the 80s, after I left the Palais de Merveille, I'm too tall. Nobody will cast me. If I went to a cattle call, they go, no, you're not right. I said, but I didn't do anything. Yeah, you're too tall, Okay, so then I go to another one. They go, oh, you're perfect. I said, but I didn't do anything. Well, you've got this great silhouette, Anyway, so, I'm kind of like out of the box. I've always been sort of out of the box, I was the kid with stripes and polka dots.
And you were still trying to get acting jobs at that point. You were still thinking, oh, I want to be an actor. Yeah.
Not an actor, but I was doing walk around like everybody in the 80s. I created 15 different characters. One was the giraffe, which actually ended up in the hospital. It was created for the Bronx Zoo, doing shows for children at the zoo. And it was the first time I hadn't done my own costume. It was done by brilliant costume maker Stacey Morse, who died about 10 years ago. And she had this vision of me as a giraffe. But I had the Statue of Liberty, and I sang in cabaret, and in the 80s was a huge learning experience. And I had my own group called Pandemonium and the Dragonfly, and we did tour a bit. I sang in cafes, Polly Holiday. I sang feminist cowboy songs, cowgirl songs. I just changed all the words. That's all. Just have to change the words.
I love being political.
And so somehow when I came to France, my intention was to, and I had only worked with the Big Apple Circus Clown Care Unit for 3.5 years.
But how did that happen? How did you get into that? So because you went back to New York after this 10 years.
Yeah, had a baby.
And was it sort of accidental that you ended up with Clown Care Unit, or is it a sort of
no, not at all. I harassed them nicely.
So you'd already thought, oh, I want to combine my clowning with this.
No, right. I didn't think it at all. I was called by an agent one day in 1987, Thanksgiving, and she said, could you play your flute, and could you dress up like a turkey on Thanksgiving and go to Sloan Kettering? There are all these kids with cancer, and could you just walk around from room to room? I went, yeah, sure, I can do that. You can do anything, and when you live in New York, you can do anything. Nobody wants to be a waitress. you know. So can I be a turkey? Of course. I had the bird feet. I had the wings. You know, I had an egg I could lay. I had my flute, and you know, I was a kind of a quirky kid. So yeah, I went from room to room. I encountered, you know, dozens of bald children, and I had never been in that situation in my life, and I was alone. It was in a way it was devastating, but I'm good in an emergency. You know, I'm really good when there's a fire in the house, and there was an emotional fire going on, and I just stayed in the moment, made made the kids laugh, brought them as much pleasure as I could muster up at that time, with absolutely no technique for hospital. But you know, I had spent 18 years in the streets. I do know people, and you know, I've got this teasing kind of joker personality, and yeah, and you know, I made $100 and I spent most of it going back to Brooklyn in a cab crying. And I went, wow, I could do this, but God knows, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. What is this? You know, it's like, is this just going to be at Easter or Thanksgiving? And honestly, a month later, it was Christmas time, and I used to do this, you know, wacky fairy, the mistletoe fairy. We would get people to kiss underneath an umbrella with mistletoe. And Laura Fernandez, another performer, was sitting next to me, you know, getting into fairy gear as well, for like one of those Christmas shows where we would make good money. We make lots of money, you know, the walk around performers in the 80s in New York City. And I mean, we were making at the end, like when I left in 91, we were making $100 an hour. We were making a really good living in these crazy characters. We all had like 5 or 6 agents, and on the weekends they would send us to, you know, all kinds of gigs. And Laura said to me, you know, I just had this amazing experience this afternoon. I was in a hospital. I was performing for children from bed to bed. And I said, well, what is it? You know, I was totally like a magnet, you know, just, what is this? It exists. Laura really opened up this whole world for me that night. And she says, well, they're not looking for anybody. Nya, 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 nya. So I called them anyway. And I must have called them once a week and saying, when are you going to audition people? I think I'm made for this work. You need me. You know, it's just a pain in the ass. And finally they said, oh yes, we're having auditions. This was like in February or something. Would you like to come and observe? So I came and observed, with a wonderful magician, observed the same day, Todd Robbins. And I guess a lot of other people as well. And then a week later, I auditioned, and I was wearing like a bodysuit, you know, like a really clingy bodysuit, and I had a giraffe tail, you know, behind, and ears, antenna. And Michael Christensen, you know, Dr. Stubbs, the iconic, mythical clown from the Big Apple Circus. He, you know, I was waiting in a waiting room with a bunch of bozos. I was not a red-nosed clown at all. Yeah. I mean, for me, I was clown.
So there were people there who were in that traditional.
Oh yeah. Bozo, yahoos. And you know, I was like, what the fuck? What am I doing here? Michael comes in. He says, "Dr. Giraffe, it's your turn." You know, with his voice. And I was completely terrified. And you know, and he walked me immediately into intensive care. Lovely. Wow. Immediately to the bedside of a young girl. He says, yes, this young lady's just had heart surgery, and she's still mostly asleep. Show me what you can do. Oh my gosh. What can I do? So I had no props. I had a flute. I had a music box in my pocket, like a little teeny music thing, you know, ding, ding, ding. I thought, okay, let's start off really delicate. So I took the music box, and it was Over the Rainbow, you know, and I played it. And I saw her eyelashes flutter. And I took a breath, and I went, and I was still panicked. And I said, well, what can I do now? So I took the flute. I played Over the Rainbow. And I saw her eyes open a teeny, 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 tiny bit. And I took another breath. And Michael's still staring at me with his big brown eyes. and terrifying me. Completely terrified I was. And I thought, okay, what's left? I can sing. So I sang, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. And I somehow got through the song, and I saw this tiny, tiny, weeny smile on this beautiful 12-year-old Hispanic child. And Michael walked me back to the dressing room. We might have done one more room. God knows. It was just survival mode for me. I got a call, and I thought, well, I've really messed this one up. I don't know how to do anything here. It just, he showed no emotion, and he didn't say that was great. He didn't say that was terrible. He just said goodbye, and we'll call you in a week. And they called me and they hired me. So that was the beginning. That was the tip of the iceberg for me. And I had really, really, I was for 6 months at Harlem at the hospital with Dickie Robbins and Lane Barton and Kim Winslow and just some amazing performers. And it was at the time when Bill Irwin was doing his show, and a bunch of the performers were taken out of Clown Care Unit. I think there were only 6 people at the time. And so I really got a lot of work right away. Like 3 times a week, I was at Harlem Hospital, and they were opening a new program in the Bronx at Montefiore Medical Center. And I just begged to open that program with Kim Winslow, who was just the most brilliant white clown in the world, elegant and, no authority, even though he tried. And so musical. He had these bells, and we were both intensely musical. So we could play Bach on bells and flute. We were quite accomplished actually musically. And you had to have like a circus skill to get into the Clown Care Unit at the time. You had to juggle, you had to do magic.
Yeah.
Whereas I had spent most of my life just improvising. I had some of those skills. I think that's why it's probably the only reason they took me. And I could still do I could still do a bit of a walkover and, walk as a spider, backwards. But you don't really do that in the hospital. And so Kim and I had this amazing marriage. He was my clown husband, for better, for worse. We went in the first day, and what we were told to do was to say, well, we've washed our hands. I have a puppet. I have some bubbles. Where can we not go? And the nurse looked at us, Susan, her name was Susan. She said, would you sit down and have some coffee with me and get a piece of paper? And this was the first enormous lesson on how to be a medical clown. She says, okay, don't put your costume on. I just want to tell you that in the first room, there's Becky. We have 3 Beckys today. One has cancer, the other has cancer, and the third one has cancer. They have different cancers, but they're all named Becky. All right, this one has this one has that, this one has long red nails, and she loves nail painting. So she began to give me the elements of how to adjust the way you perform to each child. This Becky, she doesn't speak, she's Puerto Rican, she doesn't speak any English at all. And then there's Amar. Amar's got AIDS. This is 88. This is when children had AIDS. He has no parent. He had no parents. He's pretty aggressive. He's in the dark all the time. So, Amar was a huge story for me and Kim, Dr. Lune. It was a huge story. I mean, we worked with him. I'd say worked with him for over a year till he died. And it was all about rejection, and it was all about accepting rejection and loving rejection. And his rejection was so spectacular all the time, just get the fuck out of my room, you stupid clowns. And we loved it. At the same time, we left. We would respect his privacy. And this went on for a really long time, maybe months. The rejection. There's the postman wanting to sell a calendar, so I'm not going to go to the door. Anyway, eventually, we went into the room. He threw a huge box of cornflakes at Kim's head. Cornflakes exploded all over the room. Kim was so brilliant that he fell down, big clown fall. And that was the opening. And then there was this amazing relationship. And we go and I said, what's on the menu today, Amar? He'd go, well, I'm going to roast you. I'm going to turn you into shish kebab. I mean, he ran the show. He was the metteur en scène. He was the director. And at the end of his life, really the end of his life, wherein he couldn't eat, he was just sort of lying in bed with tubes and things and no family. Kim and I would go in and say, what would you like today? What's on the menu? He'd go, I want a Jamaican patty. Kim and I took that right to heart. We said, we'll be right back. We ran to our dressing room. We got some money. We ran to the local Jamaican, restaurant. We came back with a hamburger. Is this clowning? No, who cares? We were just trying to make this kid as happy as we could at that moment. And he says, put that on my table, open it up, because he couldn't do it himself. And he just lay there and went, that's good. That is so good. So this is what I do. This is what I did. This was the basis of what became for me a profession. And I left the clown care unit because I actually felt like I couldn't grow there. I would be one of their good performers. I would do the work really well, and I loved it so much. But again, this part of me that's an entrepreneur, that is a director, that has a vision, was taking over, and I needed to have more improv in the work. I needed to have performers that I picked myself. I needed to have performers that were trained, that had more training. And we had these great meetings, clown care unit, and God knows we just learned to talk to each other. And we had pain, and we had, I remember someone saying, well, sometimes it's harder to let go of a child who's cured than a child who dies. And, it's almost like the drama of healing.
Super interesting.
Yeah, then we used to talk a lot, and it was beautiful. We would meet in a cafe once a month, and then sometimes with Michael, and he would lead some pretty heavy sessions and stuff. And so I took this base, which was fantastic. Clown Care Unit was my trampoline, but it helped me take off. Like I said, find performers who were great improvisers. For me, the work has to be character based, not just skill based. For me, the main skill is going to be improv, and of course, music. Some magic. Music is huge for me because it's transversal. I don't know how you say that in English. It's good for a newborn. It's good for a kid in a coma. It's good for a crazy rapping teenager. Music has to be transversal. So if a performer, and I've auditioned hundreds of performers over the last 30 some years, if he's not a musician, but if he's musical, I'll take him and has this potential, and then I'll push him in his own direction. And also, I wanted to create training for performers. It just seemed like there was no official training. It had to be formalisé, made more formal, and given a structure. I wanted a code of ethics. They're just things I was thinking of in the beginning that seemed necessary to create a profession.
So we're going to bounce back to France and hear about le Rire Medecin in just a second. And I just want to welcome or invite people who are listening in as well to ask questions, because we've only got about 15 minutes left of the hour. And I want to make sure that I know, right? We've covered a lot of ground, and there's so much more to talk about. Yes, please.
Here you go. So good.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Avner says we traded sets with Philippe Petit, who was the other rope walker, I think, not ripe walker, working the streets. A ripe walker. I like that. Marion Marcus says hello from New York. Fascinating conversation. Great stories of the fabulous
That's my
work
cousin.
you do.
She's my cousin.
No way.
Oh yeah.
Hi, Caroline, cousin. Good to have you here. So yeah, folks, if you have questions for Caroline or observations, make sure you get them in now so that we can address them. John. Hi, John. John says, Caroline, I love hearing the names. Laura Fernandez, Michael Christensen, Kim Winslow, Lane Barton, Dickie Ellis. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And, well, yeah, you're one of those giants, Caroline. We're standing on your shoulders.
I'm sitting down right now.
Thank you, Giraffe.
And I have 2 hip replacements.
Oh, yeah. Well,
oh, yeah.
I guess that limits things.
Yeah, well, acrobatics for 20 years.
Yeah. Stick to the music, Caroline.
Well, you know, during the lockdown, I realized that I couldn't go back to playing the flute in the hospital because we were wearing, and we still are wearing, masks.
Oh, and it's a wind instrument.
Yeah, I had to teach myself the ukulele.
Ah, that's where the ukulele comes. Well, I love the ukulele. It's great. One of my favorite instruments is the melodica. Do you know that?
I do know that, but you can't sing with it.
No. Although somebody I know has invented a kind of balloon attachment to it. So it becomes like a bagpipe thing where you can kind of control the air going into it with the balloon and you can play it and sing.
Wow.
I know, right?
So what are the questions? I'm curious.
Yeah. What are the questions? I'm not getting any yet. So fire away with your questions, folks. And while you are thinking about your questions, shall we, because you were in the midst of a transition and I kind of broke the flow. You were talking about how you wanted to really take the reins and there were certain things you really wanted to do. And I assume this led to moving back to France and setting up Rire Medecin.
Well, I sort of jumped off a cliff and I sort of networked for a full year and I made Michael completely aware of the fact that I wanted to leave and start something in France. And I had even offered the Big Apple Circus like a branch in France, but that did not interest them at the time. But I did he gave me a beautiful doctor's bag and his blessings at St. John the Divine. And off I went. I didn't necessarily think I was going to stay for more than 2 or 3 years. I thought I might just teach people what I knew and create a small troupe, right? Now we're 135. And then go back to God knows what in New York City, because I sort of dragged my sculptor, potter, ceramist husband out of his studio. We had this great loft, you know, for $400 a month on 18th and Broadway. Oh, yeah, gosh. And my poor daughter, who's now 42, but she was 11 and a half at the time, did not speak French and did not want to leave her Barbies and her friends. So, yeah, it was a big adventure. We jumped off a cliff because I got a first grant from the Florence Gould Foundation, like total faith in what I was doing and so much encouragement. I had this wonderful man, John Young, on the phone, and he said, okay, I'll give you $5,000. I said, you're out of your mind. You don't know me? You haven't seen me? How do you know you can trust me? He says, well, I said, did you get my dossier? Did you get my pitch? He goes, no, I haven't gotten it yet, but I love the idea. He says, go to France, come back with results. There's nothing more motivating in the whole world than someone who says something like that.
Yeah.
So I did. I went off to France. I visited hospitals. I met doctors. I networked. I'm a good networker. And I love getting work for people, which is a funny thing also. I love creating something where people work. I mean, I love the collective genius. I think that's the most beautiful thing in the world is to have a family, you know, a performing family. So yeah, I got promises from 3 different doctors out of maybe 6 or 7 hospitals that I visited that they really loved the idea of the program. And from then I really had the basis of writing for money, of asking for money. And I almost immediately got money based on that from the French government, the Minister of Culture. And then they gave me enough money for me to move. Florence Gould gave me another $20,000 to set things up. I got to France. I hired a good friend of mine, Anne, who became the first Madame Choufleur, Madame Cauliflower, became one of the first clown. And
is that Anne Suzanne?
Exactly.
Yeah, David's just written a comment asking if she's still with Le Rire Medecin.
Well, I think she's in Martinique right now. Yeah, she's still with us, but she's not performing. She hasn't performed with us for 2 years. But she's still with us.
And she was there from the beginning.
Yeah, she was there from the very, very beginning. And from there, I probably auditioned 50 people in 3 months in order to find, 4 rare birds. So there was Pina, and there was Serge, and Laurie Leshen, who's, Pina's still there, Laurie's still there, myself and An. The only person not there is Serge, who's now retired and lives and is a grandfather. So, yeah, people stay in this work when you take good care of them. And it seemed like one of the first things to do was to set up a structure where they would feel they were heard, because it's difficult work. Throwing someone into a oncology ward when they've never been in one takes care, and you have to prepare them for it. So we have and we still have ongoing training in medical, social, psychological subjects, and of course, artists come and train us. We've had great clown masters, Alain Gautret, who died, Michel Dallaire, who died, was one of the great clowns of Cirque du Soleil. Alain Gautret was just a brilliant clown master, Rio Sarcey in France. So, once in a while we would take off a week or two and just really dive into clown. That's what got me wearing a red nose, by the way.
It's really interesting because there is in your work and the work of Rire Medecin such a rigor and in terms of the clown side of things, which is just so impressive. It sounds like you're like a very, very accomplished artist, and you're training and working to maintain that. But what about the relationship with hospitals? How has that evolved over the years, and how receptive were French hospitals? Because it was a new idea to them, right?
Well, it was 31 years ago. It's not anymore, but it's almost like every time you go into a new place, you have to start all over again, and you have to have the trust of the staff. My method was to go right to the top. In other words, not the director of the hospital, but the head doctor and the head nurse. And then when you have them on your side, then you can work, because they open up all the doors. If you try to go in the back door, it's just not the same thing. You're doing like a supermarket animation, or walk around. And because I wanted to insist on the fact that we have a nurse's report in the morning, that we had a proper dressing room with water, and we could lock up our stuff. I mean, Montefiore Medical Center, I got dressed in a broom closet, basically. So there were things that, and then there had to be a contract with the hospital that even though they weren't giving us money, that there were certain rules and we had this code of ethics so that we would respect medical privacy, that every performer had to sign off on that. There was no talking about this patient at a dinner party, for example. And respecting hygiene. I mean, it's really important now. We went back to the hospitals after 2 months after lockdown, because our hospitals trusted us that we had a COVID protocol. I mean, we went back with not even ukuleles. We went back with, costumes that had been basically boiled. In the first month we went back after lockdown.
This speaks to a question, actually. Marion Marcus says, how did COVID impact your work in France, and what's happening in hospitals there today?
Well, it impacted our work that, first of all, children only see our eyes and, of course, our bodies. And it impacted us because some of our performers were sick, and we had to, replace them at the last minute. It impacted our work in Nancy because they were the hardest hit during COVID. So our clowns didn't go back for a year, and they got really depressed. We really had to learn how to support our performers. I mean, I spent 2 months on the phone during lockdown, making sure everybody was all right. We had a new artistic director at the time. We were really almost training people to do videos for children. We had to create a whole system of videos, YouTube channels, and even live encounters.
Yeah.
So there was a lot going on during lockdown, and then COVID is back again. We just got a notice from Marseille that really strict, the ninth wave they call it now in France. And I'm just sort of crossing my fingers that they don't kick us out over the holidays.
So when, as a teacher, Caroline, did you start doing stuff online as well as a clown teacher during the pandemic?
I'm not basically known as a teacher. There are people that are much better than I am in my company, like Lori, Ami, Pina. But I was part of I can teach. Of course I can teach. But in a way, I wanted to stay humble with my own group and bring in really fantastic teachers who were much better than myself. I mean, that's the rule for casting a performer is always cast above yourself. You'll learn something. Never be the best. I mean, it's stupid to be the best. It makes no sense. You don't learn a damn thing, right? Anyway, so yeah, teaching online. I was involved in an Erasmus grant that involved 5 countries. So I had to teach. I got to teach live in Norway. That was fantastic. But I had to teach a few days in Italy, just online. So I had to develop. I developed films. For example, we did an object jam, right? You take an object and you turn it into a million things. So I would have each performer take an everyday object. Could be a teacup, could be a dish, right?
Yes.
And transform it into something magical, because that's what we do in a child's room. With COVID, we had no props. So where were the props? They were in the rooms. They were sterile. They were clean. So watching these incredible Italian performers take like a teddy bear or take a colander and to turn it into 20 different things. And I would put on music for them, and then they would do a little performance for their 15 other colleagues. So we go one by one. I had another like emotional exercise called name and echo. I mean, it's kind of abstract, so I can't explain it right now because we don't have much time left. But it was a challenge. I mean, for me, it was torture. But again, I love restriction. I love contrainte. I love someone to say no to me. I think that's the deep clown in me is just say no, and I'll have a ball.
Right. Margaret says, has Le Rire Medecin been replicated in other countries?
Yeah, all over the place. Yeah, not us though. I mean, for me, it makes no sense. I mean, there are 500 pediatric wards in France. Now we don't even service more than 15% of them. So there had to be a spirit of sharing, of SMH, they call it, of transmission. We have a school now that has a certification program. In 6 months. We take really good performers, good clowns, and we give them 6 months of training in 3 different modules of 2 months. And we slowly bring them into the hospital. We give them lots of medical, social, psychological, and artistic training to adapt their work. So a lot of these performers have started their own groups in France. Now there's now a federation in France, and there's about 15 groups that belong to it. We really very militant about working in pairs, not solo clowning, because there's this incredible encounter, right? There's love, there's conflict, there's reconciliation.
Tell us about this.
What about my spaghetti exercise?
Yeah. You just reminded me of it because you did this, and you talked about having pairs.
Well, I just invented an exercise where basically you take your forefinger and it's so funny in this screen, and someone takes and between our 2 fingers is a piece of spaghetti, and it is the fragile link. It is the child, symbolically, metaphorically. It is the fragile link between 2 performers and this child in the middle. So I'm going to guide you, Barnaby. Follow me. Right. Great. And stay the same distance. So in a way, this is what we call, no, there you go. The spaghetti just dropped, I think. So metaphorically, it's what I call empathetic distance. So you have this empathy, which you have to have if you're going to work in a hospital with children who are so fragile. And you have to stay the right distance. Otherwise, you will suffer. You're going to suffer anyway.
And it's also about
it's a very emotional exercise. I do it only with music also, so that people can really focus and stay in the moment. There are many ways to do it, actually. Many ways to do it.
And it's in person as well, right? You can do this in person where you have one person in the middle who's holding the...
Mostly in person. Yeah. Mostly in person. Yeah. But it can be done on screen if you're very careful and take it very slow between two performers. But the screen has its own logic also.
Yeah. No, it was beautiful because you were, I think before we came on, you were describing how you do it in three groups of three, where one person is like the patient in the middle, who and they're kind of orchestrating.
Exactly.
They're in control.
Who leads who? Who, I mean, you know, who cures who? That's one of the things Michael said a long time ago. Who is healing who? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a beautiful question, right? It's such a big philosophical question that goes beyond the realm of you know, the specificities of hospital clowning. And maybe that's a good question to just, you know, finish on.
There's so much to say. I mean, I could go on for hours, but I appreciate the way you led me through this dance.
I don't know. Who was leading who?
Exactly. That's how you dance, right?
I felt like I didn't have to do anything. I was riding the wave.
I didn't either. I'm so curious to know who's out there.
Yeah, well, there's quite a few people out there, and I'm sure that they've really enjoyed it. And I just want to say one more time, Caroline, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Not just for coming on today, but for all the work that you do and being an inspiration to so many people. And, you know, we have to give gratitude and thanks to every single person who's involved, but you're the one that sort of stands up and, you know, puts your head above the parapet in lots of ways and organizes. So it's an incredibly valuable thing that you do. And I'm just so grateful.
There's I can't remember which clown of the clown care unit said this one day: we're tap dancing in the minefields. And I love this expression. Yeah,
it feels a bit like that these days, doesn't it?
It does. Well, yes, sometimes literally.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in today. Caroline, I'd love to have you back one day. Let's do this again.
Sure. Bring me on with Melissa.
Okay.
My sister.
Yeah.
Or Evan, my brother.
Yeah. Laura, maybe.
Laura, fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I'll talk to you again in a moment. Bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for another amazing Clown-versation. This one felt extra special somehow. So I'm so grateful to Caroline and all of you for tuning in. If you're not signed up for Shannon Calcott's workshop tomorrow, why not do it right now? Give yourself an amazing Saturday treat as we head into December. And next week, I'm going to be talking to the amazing Daniel Stein, who is one of the best mime performers and teachers in the world right now. And he is based in California. He'll be talking to me next week on Clown-versations. And they just keep coming. I've got amazing people coming all the way through January. So stick around, check it out, be involved in the clown world. And thank you so much for all the work you do, and keep clowning. Bye for now.